Hello and welcome everyone to the latest installment of the Oregon Coast Artist Talk series. My name is Tom Webb. I'm the director here at the Newport Visual Arts Center in Newport, Oregon on the Central Oregon coast. It's a beautiful July day. We are beating the heat from the valley. I'm super excited to have Rachel Hibbard and Michelle Avis Federer Nadoff with us to talk about Rachel's current exhibit at the Visual Arts Center, Tree of Living Things, which will be up through July 31st in our upstairs gallery at the Newport Visual Arts Center, which is currently open Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 4 p.m. Rachel's exhibit, Tree of Living Things, includes oil, encaustic, and gesso paintings reflecting Buddhist cosmological charts. So welcome both to Rachel and Michelle.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate having the honor of being shown at the Newport Arts Center.
That's right.
And I'm very pleased to be able to join in a conversation with Rachel about this pretty beautiful series that I remember seeing when she was first producing it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very resonant series that's so important to what is going on today.
Right, and it's exciting to know that Rachel is in Portland and Michelle is in Brooklyn right now, and I'm coming to you from Newport. I'm going to give everyone just a little bit more of a bio on Rachel and Michelle, and then I'm going to hand it over to them to talk about their relationship to each other and their relationship to Rachel's art. So Rachel was born in Portland, Oregon, and is a graduate of the Pacific Northwest College of Art. She earned her MFA from the University of Michigan. Her work has been exhibited at the Chicago Cultural Center, State of Illinois Gallery, and the Blue Sky Center for Photography, and the Portland Institute of Contemporary Art in Portland. She is a teaching artist, and she has led projects for Gallery 37, Orlo, the Cascade Forest Alliance, and Willamette River Keepers. Rachel is also an instructor in the Portland State University School of Art and Design. Now, Michelle is an anthropologist. She has her PhD in social sciences, and she earned an MFA and BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Her long-term ethnography with the coppersmiths of Santa Clara del Cobre, Mexico, integrates apprenticeship with community projects. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on the social and aesthetic performances of artisan agency, with a special emphasis on rituals and gestures as techniques for making things and lives. She's an assistant editor of the Journal of Embodied Research, a Fulbright scholar, and editor of Rhythm of Fire, the Art and Artisans of Santa Clara del Cobre. Hope I got that all right. So again, welcome Michelle and Rachel. Why don't you lead us off?
Well, I want to thank Michelle for joining me in this conversation, as well as Tom Webb. Michelle, I think I met you in Chicago through a mutual friend who's a wonderful artist, Anna Horvath. And you were at that time. Uh-oh. You guys hear the doctor. You were at that time, I think, a pretty active member of the Chicago art scene. And we sort of just had a lot in common, I think, but we had a lot in common and then nothing whatsoever in common. I think I came from the West Coast and was not a big city person. And Michelle has deep roots in kind of Chicago and maybe a background that is so different, that I think what we had in common and what Michelle's work exemplifies is the sense of the body. Actually, it's a strange thing that it just a sensitivity to physicality is something that I know I had and felt. And I don't know if I immediately identified that in Michelle, but I know I saw that in her work, even then, and now she's gone on to get this PhD and do some important work in ethnography. I know her, and we've always talked about art.
Yeah, and I guess I think that was like a good introduction to how we met, because we were both in the Chicago art community, which was much smaller in those days. It was a more tight-knit community in some ways, but I think that what you said about how you connected to my work, I connect to yours, and like looking at what you wrote about your work for this show. Like I wrote down little phrases from the statement, and it's like kind of like crazy magical that I feel like what you're writing about and what you identified that you were interested in my work is really what my research is about, in terms of doing my own work and what I'm interested in as an anthropologist. So materiality and the body and everything. But would it be all right? How would you, if I like repeated some of the phrases from your statement, and then maybe you could talk about them a little more, but I think it expands on what you're talking about, like making art and physicality and materiality. So like you write that the brushstrokes are like coral reefs. And I thought that was something, maybe, I don't know if I should just start with that and ask you to like talk about that more.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is a good place to lead in, and maybe I'll share some of the work as we're talking. Over the years, I had a kind of uneasy relationship with painting. I was educated as a printmaker, really, and painting was always this more grandiose, ambitious endeavor. And so, but I love paint and I love color. And so I started several bodies of work before this, but this is maybe the one I feel the strongest about so far. And I wanted to build, I felt I had an idea about the theme, but creating a composition was something that I struggled with. It seemed I was halfway in between sort of a process painter and somebody who had a pretty clear idea of the image that I wanted to start off with. And so I ended up doing this technique, and that's why this body of work took years, is I'd start out with a rough drawing and then layer it, create many layers and then scrape back. So I guess that some of these paintings have many versions scraped off and built up. So it's quite an irregular surface. And so I felt like I was kind of as if it was sediment or some kind of natural organic process, finding a composition that fit the exact scale of each panel and working to balance things off. So I guess that's what I'll say with that.
Because I think that in a way, like some of the other things that I noticed, which I think you're addressing, you wrote about that that the paintings kind of emerged they're a struggle with intervening ideas. And so in a way, when you're talking about the scraping and the sedimentation and revealing and hiding and editing and what's there and what's not there, it's really about all these intervening ideas. But to me, they're visual ideas, but they also are physical, because you're very aware that you're making, that the image is made.
Mhm.
And so the struggle ends up not being so much a struggle. They're so resolved and beautiful and harmonic. I guess the other thing that I wrote, which applies to the process, but maybe in a bigger, in a like bigger way, because besides your struggle with the images and the paint itself, it seems like you're struggling with or working out ideas about the world in general, like in a philosophical kind of way. And that, because when you write that your painting is how we are in the world, that we continually constructing our physical and social selves. So I felt like that's also a statement about your process, but also about thinking about what it is to be a person in the universe, this natural universe that we're part of. So
I really, because the work, as took, at least from 2000 to almost now, because I did a little work before I hung
wow.
it. And I would go back and radically change work, or turn it upside down or scratch it all out and start over. I did feel like, I did a lot. I had a lot of ideas and did a lot of other things in between coming back to the paintings. And I think they're a sort of record of that long stretch of time, as far as I'm concerned. And there's evidence of that in the work, but maybe not the exact time. And I think that, as you probably know, and I know I've talked about this, is I got these images from both the world around me, where there's many trees, but the idea of sort of this cosmology, or kind of a chart of existence, is a very seductive one that many cultures have come upon and used in one way or another. But I have looked at a lot of Tibetan work, and mainly for the philosophical kind of educational purposes and color. But these charts are also really drawn from more evolutionary charts. And that's one thing I want to make clear about this work, that at the time I was doing these, I was also pretty active trying to stop clear-cut logging and teaching about environmentalism, doing some workshops, and being an activist to a certain extent here in the Northwest. And I think that for me, these were kind of an abstraction of an idea of a whole bunch of my life coming together in these works. I guess is what I want to say.
Because I remember that that was a big decision why you went back to Portland, was because of your activist work, which you were kind of like a pioneer, because now that's so important to what so many people are trying to integrate into their own practice. And you've been working on that for decades already. And I mean, the heat waves, everything that's going on right now, it's like, it's becoming more and more urgent. And it's, I don't know, to me, it's like a great feat to be able to be able to somehow integrate that into work, but also be able to be an advocate and an educator. And I think that part of when you talk about going back to the statement about that your brush strokes are like coral reef, to me, that's a very big statement, because it's also like, I think I talked to you about this anthropologist, Tim Ingold, but it's also, he talks about, it's a general anthropological like problem that people are fighting against, which was like traditionally in academia and in the intellectual world, there was like always a division between nature and culture, and that human beings were to control. It was like culture was something that we control and we manipulate, and almost like we're above nature and nature is below us. And Ingold talks a lot about that, like making the bird making the nest is like you making your painting. Like we're part of, we're not separate from nature.
And I just that's something that rings very true. And I wanted to say that obviously a lot of people disagree with that, that was kind of a stance that at least Western artists might have sort of unthinkingly adopted. But I think there's many artists, I mean, the artists, maybe not the art historians, would say that they are nature, they're connected to the world in this very direct way. Anybody who works with their hands, I think, has a sense for that, and also as an artist.
Yeah.
On that note, I guess I wanted to say that I came upon this quote by Paul Klee where he says, he drew this little, and I'll just hold it up. This is this wonderful, but difficult to see, let me see, image of this fir tree for a lecture on modern art. And he placed the art is from the roots, the sap rises up into the artist. It flows through him and his eyes. He is the trunk of the tree, seized and moved by the force. He directs his vision into his work, visible on all sides. The crown of the tree unfolds in space and time, and so with the work. And I think that he, maybe in Eastern Europe, but also worldwide, there's this tradition of the image of the tree and a sacred tree of life, or kind of is a center point, going up and down, and particularly under the ground, through the ground plane that we stand on, into the earth and up into the heavens. And it represents kind of a cosmological starting point for many cultures. And here Paul Klee is kind of mentioning the artist connection with this point, or this whole object.
Which I think that for you as an artist, then, I mean, that means something very particular. I mean, going to Paul Klee, because it's also about you're going back to the physical. It's also like the unity of the mind and body, because I think, although it's true that most although it's true that most artists might feel they're part of nature, a lot of artists, I think, separate the doing and making from their ideas because they have other people make their work, which is part of it's part of the capitalist art market. It's part of the capitalism that's the underground of the art market, but so I think that it's important to recognize that for you making the work and the progression, because it's been 2 decades that you've worked on these.
Yes.
So that kind of progression and weaving into your own life is part of the work. You couldn't have had anyone else do this for you.
Right.
And so that I think that's like very particular to your work, that it's like handcrafted, but then at the same time, if people come to the show, your work has I know from being near your work, like although it's very physical and you're very involved in the process, they're immaculate surfaces. They're like, they're so pristine, and the way that they're made, they're as like perfect almost as you could get. And it's really interesting to understand. One of my questions had been about how you made decisions about what was revealed, hidden, and erased or cut out. That had been one of the questions, which I think you kind of answered.
That's
I don't know if you wanted to say more.
I'd like to say more about
but
that.
I was.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Michelle. Actually, I was, along with trying to find a natural way to fill the panel, with this idea of the tree of life, a tree that represents a lot of things, lineages, time. I think I wanted to come to a point where it was to cut to the chase, as interesting as possible and as simple as possible. And I was always fighting, simplifying, cutting out something that I kind of liked that really didn't work with the painting, as all painters do, and keeping its like an animal or a tree is so complex, keeping the complexity while simplifying. And I think that's evolution hones bodies and plants to perfection, and maybe that's, and I'm not sure I did it, but that was my goal, is to try to work with the image till it was as rich as I could make it and as simple as I could make it. And now I've done a lot of other things that are much simpler since then. And I'd be interested to come back with that work, come back to the image from the standpoint I am now in terms of some other groups of work that I've done, and see what happens. I'm sure I could get it simple.
Well, it also seems like you're developing, this is like developing a vocabulary and all the different stories about trees. It's not, I think it's the reduction. It seems like the reduction that you do is to make things clear, but it's not to make them simple. So it's like you could look at them and they have many, many meanings. There also is an aspect of them where they're like you're aware, almost like they're movable parts, that they could have been cut paper laid over, and there's like this collage element and like ideas of silhouette and the different types of representation of an image. So that's really interesting also, like all the different ways that you could
Well,
make an image.
I worked a lot with stencils, so I would cut, especially for the encaustic parts, I cut stencils and then push the hot wax through in certain sections, or stencil lightly and then paint that shape with paint. So particularly this one is encaustic and some stencil work and then paint. Let's see. Oh, this is another body work. Anyway, so this is, let me see. I did want to show this before this. I just wanted to mention that tree is next to me in my block.
Before our little chat today, I went to the botanical garden and I was watching this crane that ordinarily I can't get very close to, was very near me. So I was following it in the water, like looking at it in the water and filming it. And it was helping me understand certain things about your painting, because I was looking at the symmetry of the reflection, like the crane in the water, and it creates like a symmetry, the reflection in the water. But then also the water, I was looking at how the moving water almost fractured images. And it made me think about your paintings, because there's like there's like with this one, like there's a fracturing of the image, and it's almost like light is somewhere and shadow is another place. And there's, even though they're so still, there's like movement. It's like, I don't know, it's almost like amoebas held into place, you know. So I mean, the work is so molecular, but it's like micro and macro. And it would be like if you looked in the petri dish or you looked in the constellation and it held still, and you could just capture this constellation that really is in flux all the time.
I think that's something maybe let's see which one. This one is the one that has the most volume, but flatness is something, and trying to push space without getting too volumetric all the time, or being able to go back and forth between rendering something volumetrically and flat is a big thing I'm just fascinated with, endlessly fascinated with. And I think a lot of painters are these days, or have been. And
well, I don't know if that goes back to how you felt about Chicago. I mean, over the last 10 years, I haven't really been in Chicago anymore. I mean, I've been in Mexico, but I feel like that what the Chicago, it used to be, at least when it was a smaller group, I think in Chicago, and I'm not sure how you feel about it, that there was a real integration of abstraction and representation in a very particular way. It was, and a lot of times people focus like on the images tradition. They focus on it more about the funkiness, but I think a lot of what the images were about was also looking at ideas of representation that integrated. They were thinking about making it like the way that you're talking, like kind of like how you make an image, like what is an image, or what is like almost a hallucination, or what is reality and not. And I feel like that this painting, for example, it is what it combines what you're talking about.
yeah, that's that's interesting. I can think of all those little dots and specks on some of Jim Nutt's work that are kind of flat shapes, and then then there's the figure with the very heavy outline and and some value representing form, but the outline is what sort of nailing it to the surface.
And they
Well,
also were using very flat, a lot of it is very flat. But so I don't know, what do you think of of this combination of, like, you're working with the tree, but it's also the essence of it becomes an abstraction?
I mean, I really like the idea of this, and I could pretty much go on forever if I didn't also get sidetracked by a lot of other ideas. But the tree is such a perfect form. It also is very figurative. You know, you can, there's a lot of parallels between the human body and a tree, not to mention this, as I mentioned before, this sort of cosmological, almost universal, I'd say, cosmological connection that people have with trees, and the way evolution and our kind of origins have been represented, although that's changed dramatically in recent years since people have discovered the details of the genetic code. But that image in our history of these strands and these branches that have fallen off, going back to, I wanted to mention going back to activism and how to integrate one's work with one's moment in history. And this is the moment in not only in my lifetime, but I think in humankind's history in a way. And I don't feel I've done anywhere near what I should have done, but I have been paying attention. And I think that, in this conversation, I guess I'm struggling, and I have some ideas about how to move forward with doing, kind of fulfilling what I think is my calling in life, but also making it connect to what I believe is the right thing to be focused on these days. And I'm trying to, and I did, over the last summer, I did a lot of posters for Black Lives Matter and hung them up, and I got, that was interesting. I want to continue to do that and sort of use my drawing skills in a way that celebrates and makes visible things that I and many people, especially in Portland, Oregon, have been, just gone right by our heads. But I also want to work to make my work kind of more act in a more uncomfortable way and push a little harder and I'm still working on it. But my goal.
So to make people uncomfortable when they look at it, or?
Well, and to be a little more, I think I've used my work as a quiet kind of affirmation. That's how I have related to a lot of work in my life. I walk in a museum or I see an incredible show, and it fills me with that sense of recognition of one person, one being to another, and sometimes astounded surprise, and that is, I think, a perennial draw of looking at work in general, and that kind of, it's new, but it's also something that you recognize and are excited by, because it's affirming. But I also think that it's now a time to get out there and shake people up, and not in a mean way, but just in a, hey, there's this thing going on, and we need to, we can't go on as usual. And maybe the pandemic is part of that shakeup. I hope that that's the case.
I think that I think that the query, like what you're asking, and I feel like that's something I think about a lot. And it's also, to me, especially from the work that I've been doing for like 20 years or more in Mexico, my reflection on the art world in general, I've been very becoming, I totally appreciate the Art Center for putting up Rachel's work. So this isn't to say anything bad. I'm like so happy that this exhibition is up, but it's sort of because it is an existential moment with the pandemic and with the fire, with everything that's going on right now. I am in this. I understand your questioning too, because to me right now, I also feel like, how much do I want to engage in an art world that I think is part of a capitalist system?
Right.
And it's, I know we shouldn't be so political, but I'm asking a lot of similar questions to myself. And one thing that I would say about your work would be, an anthropologist friend of mine, I asked her, well, what's the value of what I'm doing, right? If I write about what artisans are doing, or, it's so small in comparison to what is going on right now. And her response to me seems to apply also to you. She said that so much right now is about needing people to critically think and to pay attention and to slow down. And I think that it's a mistake to overlook the fact that this body of work that you have out there, that the whole process and the paying attention is part of what we all need to be doing. Radical acts do not have to be, a radical act could be just about getting people to pay attention to things more. And I think that your work really, it's very intimate, and it might be also, it's not only, I know that you struggle when you do this work, but I think that people coming to the exhibition, just to get people to pay attention and to look at the world and themselves in it, is a big accomplishment. And I think that this, and to go in and to slow down, and I think that your work does it. To me, it's an amazing, I looked at the images you sent me, and they, perfect or not perfect, to me the images were amazing and inspiring. And despite all my own questioning right now about my role as an artist in the face of everything that seems to be exposed right now, I think that these works contribute so much. And we also do need healing. We need healing that also inspires, and this work does that.
Good ending. I do want to put in a plug for this. This is an ongoing project, Flight, What Migratory Birds Teach Us. And this is the first incarnation. And I just wanted to show. Hopefully it'll be somewhere else.
Could you play any of the sound? It would be great. There's a sound piece that goes with this.
There is. Let me, no. I was going to do that. Let me see. I'll just stop for a second. you guys talk, and I've got it here. This is,
Well, this was like a worldwide project.
yeah,
So pieces came from all over. I was sorry I didn't contribute, but
oh darn.
the
Here it
and
is.
birds are actually okay. You got the sound.
So this was playing in a little CD over there, and the bird was on. It was people contributed from across the globe, mostly in Europe. Somebody from Brazil and some kids from the Bethel Elementary School and a summer arts program also drew on the prints that other people made. And so it's a combination of many generations of people and some very playful, fresh kids work, which kind of blew us all away. So, and there's many more. That
I really like this project, and I'm astounded here in Brooklyn. I go to the Botanical Garden in Prospect Park. Most of them usually both every day. But anyway, I'm amazed at how many birds are surviving. I mean, in this city, what I am seeing, and
they're adapted.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should probably stop. But Michelle, I want to talk to you. It's not. So good to see you. I haven't been strange.
Well, Rachel, I wanted to bring up an aspect of the show that came out when we were installing it, which was that you really didn't want the paintings to hang traditionally on the wall. You wanted them to be on shelving units. Made me thinking that there is much three-dimensional works on wood panel as two-dimensional. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you were
Thank you for bringing that up. Part of that was something I really felt pretty strongly about as I developed these works. You know, I had them in the studio and they're kind of living, you know, I'd carry them around, I'd move them around, and and the panels themselves are pretty irregular. And I just thought they really shouldn't, they're not something, I don't think of them like paintings. They're something between objects and a painted surface that you'd hang flat on the wall. And although a lot of paintings sort of have a certain sense of objectness, I felt like these particular paintings needed this to be kind of out in the world like you would like an object. And so they'd be both this image and an object. And I think that's accomplished when I finally mounted, you know, got all those shelves, made those shelves and hung them in that particular way.
Yeah, it's a very slight difference in how you present it, but it does speak to the viewer quite powerfully. Well, again, I'm so excited to have both of you here and to have Rachel's exhibit, Tree of Living Things, up through July 31st here at the Newport Visual Arts Center. We're open Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 4 p.m. And there are also samples of Rachel's work online at www.coastarts.org, and there are works available for purchase, both in the gallery and online. So thanks again to both of you. Any final parting remarks? Hope to stay in touch.
Thank you.
I'm just sorry I can't be there to see it in person.
Well, you got a pretty good representation with all those images that Rachel presented. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone stay well.
Yeah. Well, it's so fun being able to pipe people in, and thank you, Michelle, for coming to us from Brooklyn, New York, and just hope that I kind of say it, maybe it's a little cliche, but hopefully we can stay in touch, and you never know when our paths might cross. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom.